Today's video is all about chatterbait fishing, and I'm gonna let you in on what I think is one of the biggest mistakes you can make whenever you're fishing a chatterbait.
Dude, like, oh, got him. Oh, that's a giant.
Right where you are.
Oh my gosh. Oh, don't bow flip him, don't bow flip him. Oh my gosh, dude, that's a 5. Oh, maybe bigger than that. Dude, that is a toad. Boom! Holy cow! Dude!
Let's freaking go, brother.
Look at how it's built.
Let's go. That's what we come to Guntersville for.
What is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Like you saw in the intro, we're talking about chatterbait fishing. And a chatterbait is something that kind of, doesn't get thought about a lot this time of year, or kind of flies under the radar. It's January. A lot of people aren't thinking about a chatterbait, but a chatterbait can be great depending on what type of fishery you're on, especially if you have grass. We're out here on Guntersville. There's grass here year round, so a chatterbait's gonna be great. Any type of offshore fish, if you're fishing, like more shallower offshore stuff with structure, your shell beds, rocky areas with wood, chatterbait's gonna be great. And there's a lot of things you can do to kind of hurt your chances of catching fish, especially this time of year. Fish are a little bit more finicky with the chatterbait as opposed to, like hotter times of the year, spring and summer. But there's also a lot of things that you can do to really help improve your chance of catching fish. So we're gonna keep it real simple today. I'm gonna give you my 2 cents on things I've done to help me catch fish and things that I've done that have actually hurt my chances of catching fish. And I've seen it, from watching fish react on forward-facing sonar, or being in the boat with somebody else and they're doing something a little bit different. They're catching fish, I'm not. So let's keep it simple. This time of year, I really think the most efficient way to fish a chatterbait, as far as like mimicking bait fish, is to replicate either brim or crawfish. And so if you've seen it in my chatterbait videos in the past, green pumpkin is my go-to pretty much 90% of the time. And the reason is it really replicates 2 different types of bait. It replicates a brim and it also replicates crawfish. So as far as my baits, right now I've got this custom chatterbait tied on. Unfortunately, this is not available to the public, but it's very similar to the jackhammer, the Z-Man jackhammer, in the sense that it's got a really tight wobble and blade, and it's designed to have that aggressive feeling hunting style action. You're slow rolling it on the bottom, you hit some grass, it's gonna deflect off of it and kind of dart side to side, same with like a rock or any type of structure. And that's the way it was designed, to really get that more hunting action. And it just really triggers a lot more bites than opposed to, like your cheaper chatterbaits and stuff. So really between this custom chatterbait and the Z-Man jackhammer, if I was to recommend one chatterbait for you, I would say the Z-Man jackhammer. It gets the job done in pretty much every circumstance that you come across on the water. Now we got some honorable mentions. The Mini Max is also a great one. I hear a lot of good things about the baby jackhammer. I haven't tried it yet, but yeah, I would recommend the regular Z-Man jackhammer if you only had one chatterbait to choose from. And I keep it really simple on my sizes. If I'm pretty much, anytime I'm fishing a chatterbait, I'm gonna be throwing a 1/2 ounce chatterbait. And the reason for that is if I'm fishing I just have a lot of freedom. If I'm fishing in 10 to 15 foot, I can really slow roll it and allow that bait to work on the bottom. If I'm fishing a little bit shallower water, say 3 to 5 foot, I can burn the bait a little bit to kind of, keep that bottom contact, but kind of keep it rising off, so, to avoid getting hung up and stuff. But bottom contact's key, or, keeping it on the grass. If you're fishing grass, keeping it on top of the grass or letting it bury up and rip it out. Every day's a little bit different. But if I'm fishing water, shallower than 3 foot or so, I'm honestly not gonna throw a chatterbait. More than likely, I'm gonna swap to a swim jig, because let's just be honest, a swim jig is a lot more fun to catch fish on up shallow. So like I said, green pumpkin, and then this time of year, I'm gonna be rotating in a different color, and that is gonna be the red jackhammer. And the reason I do that is because the crawfish here in Alabama, somewhere around that August, September-ish time, they start really to transition from that olivey green or, solid green on into the brown and reddish. They kind of carry that change on into the winter time. The fish just really seem to key in on more reddish, orangish type baits, especially if they're feeding on crawfish in heavily populated crawfish areas. So making that switch to the red is great, because not only is a chatterbait imitating a crawfish. You know, if you're throwing red, it's not just imitating the color of a crawfish, but the crawfish make this like rattling noise whenever they're scooting across the bottom. I don't know if it's their pinchers or what exactly it is. It kind of makes like a dinging noise, and it's very similar to how a chatterbait sounds when it's vibrating and bouncing off of stuff. So you're really tapping into multiple senses of a bass, you know, by targeting what color they're feeding on, and targeting, you know, using the sounds that they're using to lock in on these crawfish and stuff, or whatever else they're feeding. So let's talk about trailers. This is one of the biggest mistakes you can make. So we're talking about like the jackhammer and more aggressive type chatterbaits. You see these baits have a really distinct movement on this blade. It's going to move side to side, and that's really going to allow the bait to, you know, work side to side to side. So you want a trailer that's going to complement and allow the bait to do the most that it can. This trailer is very like narrow, and it doesn't have much action on the tail. Like, it's not like a boot tail or something. So it's going to allow for more movement of the bait, for the bait to do more of what it was designed to do. So it's running, it deflects off something. That trailer is going to allow the actual bait to do its job, do what it was meant to do. As opposed to if you put a boot tail on the back of it, and I fell victim to this a lot. And I'm not saying it doesn't catch fish, because I have caught several fish on the boot tail. But when I've been in the boat with other guys throwing more of your like narrower trailer on a chatterbait or a jackhammer to be specific, they would always get more bites. And I always wondered why. And the reason is, so these hunting style chatterbaits, they're designed to deflect and move and bounce off stuff. Well, whenever you put a boot tail on it, you know, a boot tail's really got that streamline retrieve, and it's going to have a negative impact on as much movement as you can get out of, you know, a jackhammer or any other aggressive hunting style chatterbait. And I really think that's just one big mistake you can make. Now, like I said, there are instances where it works if you're wanting to have a less aggressive approach, which sometimes works in the dead of winter. And you know, like I said, I've caught fish on it, so not trying to completely deter you from throwing a boot tail on a chatterbait, but I think many times it'll hurt you trying to catch more fish. And also, I've noticed that, you know, having a trailer like this allows you to run that chatterbait deeper, especially if you're fishing offshore a lot, like I do a lot of times with the chatterbait. So that is the Z-Man razor shad. That's a 4.5 inch bait. I think it really pairs well with a 1/2 ounce chatterbait year round, really. You would think a lot of times people like to downsize this time of year, but really doing that same bait presentation, these fish will eat it. Now, it could be that we're on Guntersville, you know, big bass live on Guntersville. They eat big baits, so that could be something to do with it. But even on like Wheeler and stuff, I've still caught fish this time of year with this bigger profile chatterbait. And one thing you can do, and I've done it a lot, my buddy Austin actually glued me into this, is using some of this thump gel, and it's called Orange Crush. That is my favorite ones so far that I've used, and it really changes the color more to that crawfish pattern, and it also smells more enticing to the fish. I don't know exactly what that smell is. I would imagine it's got something to do with crawfish, judging by the color, but you just dab it on the trailer and rub it into the skirt a little bit, and it actually lasts a very long time. We were fishing a tournament back this spring on an offshore bar and just loading the boat with bass, and this thump gel really had a lot to do with catching a lot of those fish. So let's talk about how I work this bait. So generally speaking, it's kind of a little slightly different depending on if, you know, what type of fishery you're fishing, if you're fishing grass or rock. But for the most part, I'm gonna throw it out there and I'm gonna make sure I'm on the bottom. And I'm gonna slow roll it. And here's the key, and it seems to work year round. Kind of give that rod tip a pop down, or not really a pop, but kind of just pull the rod tip down. And that's gonna allow the bait to either dart down or scoot across the bottom. And you don't have to do like big rips, you know, just real methodical rips down. And you're gonna want to reel up the slack while you're ripping the rod tip down. Judging by the water temp, if it's cooler, you know, don't do it as aggressive. If it's dead of summer, you're fishing grass, you can really pop that thing. And I've seen a lot of times in the summertime, you know, like when the grass is its thickest, I will really rip that rod tip up and allow that bait to jump out of the grass and fall back down. And I've had so many bites like that, but that's not really gonna be a player this time of year because water temp's colder. The grass is nowhere near as thick as it is in the summertime, but really keeping that slow roll, feeling that bottom contact and allowing that bait to like slowly hunt and then giving it a little bit of a pop down, reeling up the slack is a great retrieve. I caught so many fish doing that. But guys, your rod and reel is pretty important. I would say probably rod more important than your reel. I like a 7'3" medium heavy. This is a Duckett Silhouette. This is a $99 rod. I really like the Jacob Wheeler Series 2.0 7'3" medium heavy as well. I was testing this back in late summer and just really kept throwing it. You know, I never made the switch back to the Jacob Wheeler Series 2.0, but both rods are really good. You want a rod that has a good bit of backbone, but also has a sensitive tip. And I think these Duckett rods, you know, being more lightweight than most of the other rods on the market, I think they just give you an advantage, especially with moving baits. But I've got a Duckett Paradigm 6:8-to-1 gear ratio. Your gear ratio is really important. You don't want to have too fast of a gear ratio because you still want to be able to slow down, especially in these cooler months, but you want to be able to burn the bait. So I would say like anywhere from a 6.8 to a 7.1. 7.1 might be a little too fast, especially in the winter, but I throw 12-pound Berkeley Trilane 100% fluorocarbon. That always shocks a lot of people. They're like, you throw 12-pound on a chatterbait on a grass lake with big bass like Guntersville? I'm like, yes. 12-pound. I can't remember a time where I broke off on it. And I've caught a ton of chatterbait fish, especially this year. I've caught hundreds of them. There for a couple months, I just glued the chatterbait in my hand. It was such a fun bite out here on the TVA, and I couldn't put it down. But 12-pound test is all you need. And it allows you to get a little bit deeper than throwing, you know, like 15 or 20 pound like a lot of guys do. But guys, that's pretty much it. So my takeaway, some of the biggest mistakes you can make is working the bait too fast, you know, not getting enough of that hunting action, whether that's due to your retrieve or due to, you know, like putting a boot tail or a similar trailer that has a lot of like hindrance to the design of the bait. Those are some really big mistakes. And just not paying attention. Like, you got to pay attention, especially if you have forward facing sonar. Watch how these fish react if you can see them. If you're fishing with your buddy, you know, he's throwing a different color or a different trailer and he's catching them, or, you know, doing a different retrieve. Pay attention, read the water, read what's going on. The fish will tell you how they want the bait presented if you just really pay attention and analyze everything on the water. So guys, I want to thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you in the next one.